Welcome. Tēnā koutou te lawhalawa bulawanaka whakawhalati lahi atu, whakalawha atu, kia rana malo lei malo ni. Warm Pacific greetings to you all. Thank you to our Auditor-General John Ryan for his welcoming address today. I'm going to speak about my role as Speaker, the important role of a Supreme Audit Institution, supporting our Parliament. I'll also cover our parliamentary context, the context of the Pacific, and the role of the Speaker in an effective democratic system. Constitutionally, the position of the Speaker of the House of Representatives is our third highest ranking position. The Queen's representative, the Governor-General, is the highest, of course, followed by the Prime Minister and then the Speaker. When our Westminster system of parliamentary democracy was still developing in Britain, the presiding officer became known as a Speaker because the House of Commons would elect one of its members to be its mouthpiece to the Crown. It wasn't always popular. Speakers lost their heads if the King didn't like the message. The Speaker would convey the wishes of the House to the King or the Queen. Now the Speaker is an important part of our democracy. I'm governed by clear principles. The first and most important is non-partisanship. All members of the House must be treated equally, regardless of their party affiliation. Any Speaker in New Zealand who is clearly biased would soon lose the confidence of the House. The second principle is independence from the executive government. I'm free to and almost obliged to disagree with the government, and I'm expected to be a guardian of good process, both in the House and in the select committees. It's my role to apply the standing orders and, if appropriate, the Speaker's rulings, the rules governing Parliament, and to adjudicate where there are procedural matters. I've several other roles: presiding officer when the House is sitting, committee chairperson, spokesperson of the House, sort of a quasi-minister of the Crown, and of course I'm a member of Parliament in New Zealand. As a committee chair, I oversee the Officers of Parliament Committee, which oversees the appointment of the officers of Parliament. Our committee covers the Auditor-General, the Ombudsman and the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, all of whom are directly responsible to Parliament. The Officers of Parliament Committee has administrative functions around the Officers of Parliament, such as recommending their appointment, so selecting them, their funding, and developing codes of practice. It's a cross-party committee and works on consensus. We agree on things. It's an important function within our democracy. As a guardian of good process for the committee, I help ensure our Officers of Parliament appointments are suitable and not politicised, although there have been some attempts to do that in the past. In carrying out these functions, the Speaker is totally independent of the executive government. Here, the Auditor-General is one of the Officers of Parliament. They are independent. They cannot be directed by the ministers, and their funding comes from Parliament and is set by our committee. Our Governor-General appoints the Auditor-General for a 7-year term. They are not eligible for a second term, so they don't spend time trying to appeal to the Parliament. They just do their job. They have to withstand high levels of scrutiny, and they've got to be above reproach. There have been some discussions in recent times about what exactly could prompt an Officer of Parliament to be removed, and we haven't resolved that. In New Zealand, the Office of the Auditor-General helps with parliamentary scrutiny of the public sector, which is an important function for our Parliament. Their managers provide briefings to select committees on estimates and during the annual reviews. They may also suggest possible lines of inquiry so the committee can address the relevant minister, so the committee can be probing. They provide advisory support to the committees. Quite separately, the Auditor-General can choose to initiate inquiries, and they may do it on their own volition, or maybe from the public, select committees, or others. Some recent examples of the Auditor-General ensuring accountability have been reports into the land purchase at Ihimātao, the payment of emergency housing grants by the Ministry of Social Welfare, the updates on the COVID-19 spending, and our own institution, the Parliament, was audited, and there was an inquiry into the use of parliamentary service funding for electioneering in 2005, which resulted in $800,000 having to be repaid by members. Recently, the Auditor-General has given a number of information sessions which have been very useful to members. So the Auditor-General is a crucial role. It's a watchdog to hold the government to account. And importantly, the material produced is available to the public to scrutinise directly. I think making our Supreme Audit Institution successful is the fact that it is not only independent, but seen to be independent. It's watching the revenue and it's watching the spending. And in New Zealand, that includes over 3,500 different state organisations. The independence is very important because it means that the Auditor-General is able to allocate their own resources, to determine their own auditing agenda, and to publish and freely share their findings with Parliament and with the public without any interference from the government. We do have a supportive environment for our SAI, and that means that they can do their work in a proper manner. They have a clear mandate, and in New Zealand that's outlined in legislation that guarantees the independence and the reporting responsibilities. It means that the entities to be audited are clear and the scope is clear. We have to supply the funding for staff, for equipment, for facilities to make sure that they do high quality work, and that is set by the officers of Parliament. Our auditors use international standards, and I think that's crucial in making sure that we give assurance to the public that their taxes and their assets are being used appropriately and effectively. That's really important for our democracy. Really important that they seem to be independent, and that means that they play an important role in confirming controls over expenditure, making sure that they're operating effectively, stopping spending if it has to be stopped. A modern SAI also provides a vital role in providing assurance to citizens that governments are not wasting their taxes and that they're using the assets well. In the Pacific context, around the Pacific, there are challenges in supporting parliaments to hold their governments to account. I think it's fair to say we are uneven around the Pacific. New Zealand, I believe, has an important role to support both parliaments and auditors around the Pacific. Some countries are not able to allocate their resources, determine their focus, or to share their findings with the public and with the Parliament. And that's a significant issue, because if it continues too badly, people will lose faith in their Pacific organisations. It's really important that our people share knowledge with the Pacific, and the Pacific shares knowledge with us. I want to acknowledge our Australian colleagues as one of the 27 PASAI members, so the New Zealand, Australia, East Coast Australian states and the Pacific nations. It's good to see the Pacific Association of Supreme Audit Institutions working so closely in the Pacific region. The promotion of transparent, accountable, effective use of public sector resources in the Pacific is important. It builds faith in our region. And along with this goal, I think it's great that we're helping Pacific institutions reinforce their independence. I hope the Congress will provide an opportunity for you to have these conversations. I'm really sorry I haven't been present to help you. I look forward to hearing about the discussions. If there's anything I can do to further support you, I encourage you to contact me directly or via email, And please make sure that your speakers know that they have an independent ally to help them doing their job well. Thank you all.